Welcome to the Curious Hope Podcast, where we wrestle with hard topics and hidden questions. My name is Pastor JD. I'm here at Blue Mountain Community Church. I think this is our last episode in our series, City on a Hill, where we're looking at how Christ followers should engage with culture. How do we engage with culture? And today, I have my good friend Trenton here to come and talk. Thanks for coming, Trenton.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And Trenton, would you tell our listeners maybe just a little bit about yourself and why I have you on for the podcast? I should have introduced at the top of the episode. Today we're going to be talking about movies, TV shows, board games, video games, that kind of thing. Why would I bring you on for this?
Because that is literally my life right there. That described me in one sentence.
So you said you were a broadcasting major. You went to school for this kind of stuff?
Yes, I went to school for broadcasting and video production. And but I already knew about like movies and stuff before that. So I just got some more skills in it with through the school.
So yeah. What is it about all of this kind of stuff that interests you so much? Because like myself, I'll go on like a movie binge. I think 2 years ago, I loved watching movies, and I would watch like one movie a week. Now, not so much. I'm on and off. But and I've talked to you before this podcast because, like I said, we're friends and we see each other, once a week at Young Adult Group. From what I can tell, you watch movies all the time and you just love them.
Yeah,
so what got you so interested in movies?
So I've always been pretty interested in movies since I was like a little kid. I think like what got me into it is I did a play a long time ago, and then I really wanted to do acting. And then it just kind of evolved over time into movies and getting interested into them. And I just kind of like started to watch a bunch of different ones. So I've seen some from all sorts of different time periods and decades and genres. So it just kind of evolved into becoming obsessed with watching movies. And I really like storytelling in general. And I think the art of cinema is such a interesting way to have storytelling. So it totally kind of drew me in.
Yeah. What? First off, I'll say props to you for being able to watch old movies, because I remember I like going through the top movies on IMDb.
Yeah.
And I saw Citizen Kane on it. Like everyone's like Citizen Kane is like one of the top 5 movies of all time.
Yeah.
And I was on an airplane watching Citizen Kane, and I made it like 10 minutes. I couldn't make it. I thought it was terrible. So props to you for liking older movies. I like some old movies like 12 Angry Men, but I couldn't stand Citizen Kane. I'm sorry. But storytelling. So you said it made you really interested in storytelling, and that you've, not only do you like consuming this stuff, watching it, but you like being involved in writing it and acting and stuff like that. Yeah. What about storytelling in that sense, both enacting it and hearing about it? What about stories? Can you sort of go more into depth about totally. Stories? What's interesting about stories?
So like, first of all, I'm a very visual person. So like, I really like to be able to tell stories through visuals, because I think there's just something so profound about it, where you can just not talk and yet you could still tell a story just through lighting and the way your camera is shot and the color and everything. And then of course with acting, if you have the right actors, you can really just tell a story, push the emotion, and no one has to say anything. And there's plenty of movies that do that, even past the silent era. I mean, we have movies that it could be silent for like 10, 20 minutes in the movie, and you can still pick up what's going on in the story. So I think it's just it's so unique compared to like reading a book, which I fall asleep usually when I do, and then or even like playing a video game. I mean, that's another visual media for storytelling, but it's just very different. Film, you can do a lot of different stuff, just the way you craft it, because you have such this cool art to it, where I don't know, it's just something that's I really like, and it brings storytelling to a whole different sort of light that I really enjoy.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that storytelling, because I'm a pastor here. For me, storytelling is mostly oratory, so it's like with voice. You say it and then you listen. But that's so awesome, and I never thought about that before this, is that storytelling, it's really so multifaceted, is that it can be visual. Yeah. It can be, you can smell, like if you smell a certain scent and it brings you back home.
Exactly.
You can tell a story with everything. It's so multifaceted, and that's cool. I have to ask, what movie is silent for 10 to 20 minutes. Actually, I have one on the top of my head. Okay. I just thought, because I was going to say, I don't know what movies like that. The movie with Jim from The Office.
Wow, that's a great.
What? No, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
A Quiet Place. That's the only one I can think about with storytelling where it's quiet. What came to your mind when you were saying that?
Well, a very famous movie, 2001: A Space Odyssey. The first 40 minutes, there's no dialogue.
Really?
Yeah.
I've heard of that movie and I've never seen it. Should I see it?
I mean, sure.
Well, is it good? I'm saying, is it good?
it's pretty good. I mean, I enjoy it. I mean, it's a very typical science fiction movie, but it's definitely a very visual storytelling kind of movie.
What is your favorite movie of all time? And you had to be prepared coming to record this episode. You knew I was going to ask this question.
Yeah, I mean, I always have that answer, so it's no big deal. But it's The Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, okay.
So
Nice.
Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Classic.
Mm-hmm.
And favorite, and we haven't really talked about TV shows, but what would you say is your favorite TV show of all time?
My favorite TV show, I would have to say it's Community.
Community.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember us talking and debating this because for those of you listening right now to the podcast, Trenton and I got into, I don't know if it was a heated discussion or not. I think he was heated at me a little bit because I started watching Community, the TV show. And after the first episode, my wife and I, we didn't like it at all, and so we stopped. And that's your favorite one.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
That's our discussions at Young Adults as we heat about
that's it.
A sitcom.
Just duking it out over sitcoms.
Yep.
That's funny. So moving sort of to our topic of how we engage, and we'll just start with movies and TV shows before we move to like video games and board games.
Totally.
But just talking about movies and TV shows and how we engage it as Christ followers. First off, how do most Christians and Christ followers engage it? So not how should we, but what's like the predominant approach to movies within Christianity, or what did you experience, growing up? What, here at this church or another church, whatever it was.
I experienced, I'd say, two different perspectives. Not that I participated in both of them, but because one of them was, kind of boring. But so there was like just the people kind of like myself that would just be like, hey, there's a new movie out, there's a new TV show out, and we just, we watch it if we liked it, kind of just the way anyone else consumes media. Yes, we'd probably be careful on some things. Obviously, we weren't gonna like go and watch some weird satanic based thing because that's just a little too much.
Yeah.
But like, there was people that watched Game of Thrones.
So pretty much just a loosey-goosey, do whatever you want, and there's no difference between them. Okay.
If it interests you, you'll watch it.
Yeah.
And then there was the people that were like, no, I only watch things that were made from PureFlix, And it's like, okay, so you have no idea what quality is like.
Yeah. If it's not, what is it, Fireproof and Facing the Giants, then it's not on our family.
Apparently. Yeah, exactly. The amount of people that would constantly be like, oh yeah, we need to watch the God's Not Dead series. And I'm like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you find yourself agreeing with one of these sides more than the other? Or do you think they both sort of have their flaws, both approaches?
They definitely both have their own flaws because I feel like I've always run into it where they're both an extreme of each perspective. They're not really
That's what it seems like.
Yeah,
it's like there's no difference between Christ followers and cultures, or we're so removed that, it's not relatable and then it's boring.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there's no story. There's not as much of a rich storytelling, right? Yeah. I remember being a kid and wanting to watch Spider-Man so badly, and I couldn't watch it until I was like, in high school, or I think 8th grade, something like that. And my favorite, all my friends watched Star Wars growing up. I watched Bibleman because Bibleman is the Christianized version of Star Wars. But I'll just say on a storytelling level, there's a big difference between Star Wars and Bibleman.
There's a really big difference.
Why do you think that is? Because someone might come to you, and I've heard this argument before too. Well, you're watching Star Wars. Why not watch Bibleman? It's the same thing, but it's about why is the richness of story so important?
Because like if I watch Bibleman Well, first of all, it's meant for kids, so sometimes it
So it's a little different.
so it is a little different. So
Yeah.
it's already kind of like, all right, I'm past that problem in my life. But the difference between like Bibleman and Star Wars, well, one of the differences between
One of the
Bibleman and
many
Star Wars is that I think it's okay to kind of show how evil can be, like in reality. Because, even if you read the Bible, I mean, the Bible's not PG.
No, the Bible is, and we know that from young adult groups.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about some of the crazy
The
stuff.
Bible is X-rated. It's not M-rated. It's
I know.
X-rated.
It goes all out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the fact that, and I understand, like, I grew up with my parents. They only let me watch, movies and TV shows that I was the age of the rating. Which, I think is totally fine because the ratings are there for a reason.
They're there, yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't want to be scarred for life. So I appreciated that. But so I think like the difference between Bibleman and Star Wars is like when you have a story that people can relate to and connect to, it feels more real. I mean, yes, Star Wars is a space fantasy, but yeah, I can relate to it more because the characters, they go through like same human problems that I go through, where Bibleman is like way more fantasy than Star Wars because it's like, this is so unrealistic. This is not how people act,
Yeah. Okay, so I feel like we talked sort of why, the one approach isn't the best of, Christianizing everything and only being allowed to watch Christian things or only letting yourself watch uplifting things. But let's sort of show why the other side, or let's at least talk about why the other approach isn't necessarily as valid as watching everything. I'll say for myself, the simplest story sort of illustrates it, at least I think. I remember explicitly being in my uncle and aunt's basement. We were watching the Super Bowl, I think it was. And this was when I was like 4 or 5 years old. Mm-hmm. And then whenever a scary commercial would come up, the parents would be like, okay, close your eyes.
Yeah.
Because it was like a commercial for like this scary action movie or whatever. Uh-huh. And me being a kid, it's so weird, like the memories that you have as a kid. Because this is one of them. It's like I was 3 or 4. I had a beanie on, right? Mm-hmm. So what I did is I pulled the beanie over my eyes, but I pulled it enough to where you could see through it, right? So I was like, I'm disobeying mom and dad. I don't care. They don't get to control me because, toddlers are little stinkers. So anyways, I watched it. I was so scared. Like, I remember being scared to go to bed at night for like weeks after that because I watched, it was like a robbery movie or something like that.
Yeah.
And my parents, they were right. Watching that at that moment was not okay for me. It was not uplifting. So yeah, why do you think not everything is permissible? To actually use the words of Paul, everything's permissible, but not everything is beneficial. Why do you think that's the case when it comes to movies and TV shows?
Well, I was like the same way. I could just like see just one little snippet of a commercial for like a horror movie, and I'd stay up all night.
You're not a horror movie fan?
No, I didn't watch horror movies till like probably a year ago was the first time I started watching them, and I've watched very few. Because I can only take so much. Yeah. But yeah, so I think
I'm the same way. I scream like a little girl at
horror movies. Of course you do.
Yeah. No surprise.
So I think it's good to kind of keep some of that stuff away from you because like especially as a kid you don't have like a full understanding of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like I could watch that stuff now because I have a better understanding of it.
Like we're talking about, if evil, you have a better understanding of evil.
I have a much better...
Because you've experienced more of it now than you had as a kid.
But as a kid who's, this innocent person, they have no idea what they're looking at. You definitely want to kind of gradually show them. Because no matter what, they're going to face evil in the world when they grow up. It's just bound to happen. But, you don't want to throw it at them when they're like 3 or 4 or whatever, right?
What about us adults? So do you think that this only applies to kids? Like we should have restrictions as kids or us adults? Because I'll say myself, there's certain movies that I won't watch as an adult or that, I have to turn away from. Do you think that that's okay? Do you think there's certain things that we shouldn't watch as adults, or do you think everything is permissible and I'm just being silly?
No, I think it's kind of like, I think watching certain movies and TV shows is almost like having a good diet, like a food, like food. You should, it's okay, to have a little bit of cookies and donuts, and especially if you're Pastor Jim, you got a lot of donuts. And it's okay to have that stuff, but you gotta have the healthy stuff too. I think it's a good balance to like, at Halloween time, I watch horror movies because I mean, if I watch it in the summer, I just feel like a psychopath. Whatever, I watch it on Halloween, it feels right. So, and it's okay because like most of the time, I don't spend my time watching that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Not that I watch extremely uplifting stuff.
Yeah.
Other than that, but
is there some stuff that we should just stay away from in general? So to share for me personally, I don't watch sex scenes on movies or TV shows, or at least I try not to. And if a movie is just like straight up pornographic, and the reason for that is I know myself, if I'm watching that and I'm filling my head with those images, they don't just go away the second I'm done watching it. It stays there and it lingers. And I don't want to think about those things. I don't want to be dwelling on that kind of stuff. I don't want to fill my head with that stuff. So to take your example of a diet, is there some movies or some TV shows that aren't even food? They're just like glass and nails and we shouldn't eat them at all? Or do you think it depends on the person? Because that's something I've thought about. Are there some things that just everyone should stay away from, or is this just a me thing that I struggle with, but someone else, maybe shouldn't watch something with, murdering or revenge or something because it'll make them angry? I don't know.
I think it's a little bit of both, honestly. Because I think like your own weaknesses, so it's like if you know that that's gonna tempt me, then stay away from it. But then there's also just those things like that highlight the devil and kind of try to make him and his power look good. Like
that's true. There's
like
some horror movies are like that too. Yeah,
and then you like have a very popular TV show, Lucifer. It's also a comic book.
Yeah.
But like it's literally about the devil and he's the protagonist in the show.
Yeah.
So like shows like that is where it's like you should stay away from stuff like that because it's very much saying that the devil is a good person. His stuff is good. But then there's also like there's people that have watched movies that have sex scenes and stuff, and it goes right over their head. They're fine, But then there might be some people that it may not be so good for them.
Yeah.
So
you'd say I think that's a really good and measured take. Is that in some instances, on really serious issues like worshiping the devil, which is the exact opposite of what our faith is as Christ followers.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably good to stay away from that stuff.
Yeah.
But then on other issues, whether it's swearing, sex scenes, violence, whatever it is, it's really a person by person approach.
Yeah.
I like your take on that. Let's move on to talk about games and board games, because I also know you like board games and video games. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sort of grouping those together. I think that those are sort of.
No, that's totally fine. Yeah.
Those are totally different.
Yeah.
Let's talk about video games first.
Okay.
Everything that we've sort of talked about, how do you think it applies to video games? I mean, we've talked about a lot in just our short 20 minutes that we've been talking, but how do you think it applies to video games in the same sense?
It's it's a little bit different because video games is such a very unique way to interact with media because you are literally interacting with it. You're a part of the story. Yeah, exactly. So like for people who don't really understand video games, most every video game now there's a story. Yeah. And you are a part of that story. You're not just watching it. You're literally in it. And sometimes you get to make the choices in that story. And so you may be able to decide how the game ends. There may be different endings. It may be an open world game that you can just go do whatever the heck you want. So you have a lot of freedom in decisions in some of these worlds. Some you may have less, but I think some of it still applies. Same thing with movies. I think it really just it depends. I don't think I'm not one of those people that are like, oh, video games causes violence and everything. Yeah, I've played lots of different video games.
Well, you're a really hyper aggressive person. Like you almost took a swing at me when we were talking about.
That's true.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that is true though. No, yeah. So I mean, I've played so many video games, and I've never once been like I'm gonna be a violent person. I think that always just depends on mental illness. Honestly, like if someone's mentally ill and they put that in their brain, that's just gonna make things worse. Like no matter what. But there's so many people that play video games, millions of people that play video games, people that play games for a job. There's pro gamers, there's YouTubers that game, there's Twitch streamers. So like there's people that do it for a job and they're just fine. Actually, they're
Yeah.
probably better off than all of us because
Yeah.
they're like millionaires. So
Making a lot of money. So you think that the fear of it causing violence and anger like that is overblown? What are some of the risks or downsides? Because we sort of talked about it with movies and TV shows. You can either miss out on really good stories, or you can go to the flip side, and then it can harm your walk with God and put bad images in your head. What about video games? What are the risks with video games?
I think it's a little bit of the same because there are some video games that will have you participate in like sex scenes.
Really? Wow,
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean it's more of a newer thing that's
Yeah.
been going on as technology has kind of to evolve. You're able to be more interactive in games more and more. So like, you want to try to stay away from stuff like that because obviously, again, it could tempt you because you almost feel like you're.
Well, it's not even tempting. You're like doing it.
I know
But,
you're
like,
practically doing it, but now it's just weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at that point, you might as well just do it in real life. I mean, you
Yeah.
won't be as judged as much. I feel.
So something that I've experienced in my life that I think video games are different. Well, I think, and we didn't really talk about this when we were talking about movies or TV shows.
Yeah.
But I think that the danger of escapism in video games is real. I know we talked about this. You and I talked about this several weeks ago. Just about addiction to video games. So for those of you listening, there was one video game. My senior year of high school, I moved from one place to the other. My dad's an chaplain in the Air Force. And so we moved from Colorado to South Carolina, and I went to a high school, didn't know anyone, had zero, not people that are like friends, quote unquote, but they're not my friends. They all hang out and don't invite me.
Yeah.
I had like no friends senior year of high school. I became like ultra depressed. Had a really bad football season where I felt, put down by the coach and I just felt terrible. And what I turned to the game League of Legends. And so I started playing video games because to me, it was a story.
Yeah.
Well, League of Legends isn't as much of a story. It's more like competitive. But at the same time, it's something that I get to participate in and be a part of that's not my actual life. So it was like an escape for me. And I started pouring hours and hours every single day, into playing this game. And it truly became an addiction because that was my coping strategy. I had a rough day. I go and I play video games. Anyways, I wouldn't think about like serious issues or whatever. I would just go straight to the video games. So at least in my experience, video games have a little bit more of a risk than movies or TV shows because of the participation element. So it's like, well, I don't have to participate in life because I can just participate in video games. And I can be this super cool samurai wielding, ninja in video games, but in life, I'm super depressed as a senior in high school with no friends. So
yeah, being a ninja sounds way cooler.
Yeah, it does sound cooler. And well, that's fun. What do you think? Because I hope this phenomenon isn't just me. I think that this happens to more people than just myself.
You're right. So for me, I think it's like obviously just in general addictions, even beyond video games. I think it's one of those things that it really depends on the type of person you are.
100%, yeah.
Because like there's stuff that I've had friends that I grew up with that got addicted to certain type of drugs, but I would never do that. But I could get addicted to something else.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think it really depends. And then one of those things where like if it's something that could tempt you, then you should probably try to stay away from it. Or at least try to have someone remind you to stay away from it. But I think it's fine also to have a little bit of escapism sometimes. Because like watching movies, playing video games, it can be relaxing sometimes just to be able to turn on TV, do one of those and have fun. Like I play video games with my friends. Yeah. And I don't live near some of the friends I grew up with. Actually, I don't live near any of the friends I grew up with. So it's kind of a way for us to hang out. And also just kind of have fun conversation, and we don't have to really think too much about anything. So I think, but at the same time, if that is your only escapism, if you're trying to take your problems off by doing that,
or if you're escaping too much, like 24/7, because that's one thing I was just thinking of. And this might be controversial to say, but I think there's escapism in the Bible in the sense that we think about heaven. And we talk about heaven, and I think heaven's real. Like I believe that it's real, But it's really awesome every now and then to just take some time to literally sit and think about heaven and how life is going to be better. And I'm going to be able to see my dead relatives and my dead loved ones. And I'm not going to have to cry anymore. I'm going to be able to see Jesus. That's the best part, is being able to be held by God, is to just sit there and think about that. And, you're sort of escaping your reality when you ponder heaven. But I think that that's good and that's important. But I also think the same critique would go with that too. If you're doing that 12 hours out of the day and you're not living life and loving people here and now too, then there's a problem going on. Yeah. So it's everything almost in moderation, and just make sure that you're not using video games or anything to escape 24/7 from your life. As we wrap up, there's one last thing that I want to talk about, because I know it was a hot button issue like 10, 15 years ago, and I think it still is for some people. I went to seminary. And I thought this is the first time I encountered people who played this game. It's not a video game, it's a board game, or sort of board game. Okay. This is the first time I encountered people who played Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh boy.
And they had never done anything. I had never experienced it in high school, never experienced it in college, and I go to seminary. And here's Dungeons and Dragons is a game that has a lot of negative stereotypes. I want to talk with you. Are those stereotypes deserved or not? Do you know anything about Dungeons and Dragons?
I do know a little bit about Dungeons and Dragons. Well,
we can just say role-playing game. So let's describe what Dungeons and Dragons is a little bit. What Dungeons and Dragons is you have a group of people, and one person is sort of the storyteller. So it's actually similar. I think it's similar to video games in a lot of ways, in that one person is a storyteller and sort of tells a story, and every other person in the group has characters in that story, and so they get to make decisions. Like I could be an elf, who has magical powers, and you could be a troll who has a big hammer. I'm just making stuff up off the top of my head. Yeah. And then the storyteller puts you in a situation and you make decisions. So it's a role playing game. You pretend like you're someone else in a role. And so anyways, I got to seminary. I had this terrible negative stereotype of Dungeons and Dragons. Everyone at seminary plays Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. It was super, super interesting. So tell me about your experience with it, and if you think it's just pure evil, or if, like everything we're talking about, it's good in moderation, and there's some elements that are good and some elements that are bad.
Yeah, I think I think Dungeons and Dragons is fine. I mean, something you got to think about is it's very heavily based off of old English folklore.
It's like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it's like Lord of the Rings, but not as good. I mean, I think Dungeons and Dragons is cool and stuff, but like Lord of the Rings is just like way cooler. I love Lord of the Rings a lot more. But
you can do a Dungeons and Dragons based off of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, there are Lord of the Rings RPGs. There's Star Wars RPGs. Yeah. I mean, which those are ones that I've played more. But yeah, so like. Yeah, I think the biggest thing just with everything, with movies, TV, video games, sport games, I think the biggest problem that a lot of Christians have is they forget that there's a difference between fact and fiction. And there's a huge difference between something made for fiction to be taken as fiction compared to I'm putting this in front of you to now believe something else. I've literally seen, there's a whole YouTube channel. I've literally seen a documentary where these people thought the Marvel Cinematic Universe was satanic, like sort of literature or something. And I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? Like that, and the stuff that they would try to pull out of it. Like, I mean, you could make anything in any perspective you wanted to. Like if you really try, and they were stretching more than any. I kid you not. They looked at the scene of Guardians of the Galaxy, and there was a part where Rocket Raccoon and Star-Lord both said that they were the greatest pilot. Like Drax says, if you're gonna be able to go through this, you'd have to be the greatest pilot in the galaxy. And they both go, lucky for me, I am. And they pause it and they're like, did you hear that? They said I am. Because
these people are being serious?
Yeah, these people are being dead. So they have a whole YouTube channel about it. They talk about anime. They talk about Marvel, Star Wars. I mean, like literally anything that isn't pure flex. It's like satanic. And so they're like, Jesus is I am. They're trying to tell you that they're the I am. And I'm like, no, I think they're just responding an everyday response. Because in the Bible it says God is the great I am, not the only I am.
Yeah.
Because even God knew that was a generic response that people would use. So, and it's, you can, again, they also talked about the comics, like Black Panther, how there's this scene, this part in the comic, they didn't even go to the movies, just this part in the comic where they show him talking to the past Black Panthers. And you do see that a little bit in the movie too. And they're like, see, they're showing you that you can talk to the dead. And it's like, okay, no, they're showing you that he talks to the dead.
In this pretend made-up world.
In this pretend made-up world that's meant to be taken as a pretend made-up world. Yeah. There's nowhere in there that Marvel is trying to tell you, hey, believe this black... I mean, for crying out loud, he lives in a fake country. Yeah. Like, Wakanda's not even real. Okay? You know how like, naive people are? When Black Panther movie came out, there was a huge surge on, like, I can't remember if it was Travelocity or something. There was a bunch of people trying to find plane tickets to Wakanda.
Are you serious?
Like, people are stupid. Okay? Do your research. Wakanda is not a real country, people. Yeah. I mean, like, come on. And as cool as it is, and it would be a really cool country, like, there's just so much out there with board games, movies, video, everything that, like, when they make, like, when I write stories, I'm not asking you to take it seriously.
To believe it. Yeah, like, the people who create this aren't meaning.
No, but at the same time, sometimes in my stories, and other people do this too, they will put, like, biblical kind of stuff into it, because it's a way for some people who don't know the Bible to kind of hear a little about it. And that's another thing that these people were talking about in their documentary, how they think it's terrible when they try to depict Christianity, because they're like, that's wrong.
No, that's great.
No, I'm like, yes, that's great. Yeah. There was this panel in one of the comics where the Miles Morales Spider-Man was holding Tony Stark. He had died, and then it was supposed to literally be like the statue of Mary holding Jesus. Yes, it was exactly the same, and it was supposed to be, Tony made a sacrifice, Jesus made a sacrifice.
Yeah.
And really all it was art inspiring art. And that's totally fine. Having Christian art in comic books like that, that's great. That gets people aware. They're not trying to tell you Tony Stark is Jesus and Miles Morales is Mary. That wouldn't make any sense anyway, just so you know. And they were all mad about it because they thought they're like, they're trying to tell you, Tony Stark is Jesus. And I'm like, no, they're not. Like, Tony Stark is dead, and Jesus didn't actually, like, he came back from the dead. Tony Stark didn't. So like,
Tony Stark still dead.
And also, Miles Morales is a guy, and he's like 16. So I don't think he's, the Virgin Mary. You know what I mean? That'd be a little weird.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm a firm believer that the thread of the gospel runs through more than just the Bible. It runs through more than just my life and your life. It runs through everything. Like, we read that in Romans 1, that God, who has made himself evident to all of mankind throughout creation. That's one of my favorite Bible verses, because I bring it up like all the time.
All the time.
I think the thread of the gospel runs through everything. And so if you're an author writing a movie, or a Marvel author, and you're going to try to depict the gospel, or the author of Lord of the Rings, who explicitly put gospel elements, in Lord of the Rings, and you can look, our listeners, you can look that up.
He was best friends with C.S. Lewis.
Seriously, and C.S. Lewis, it doesn't get more Orthodox Christianity than C.S. Lewis.
Speaking.
So I think that's just the perfect takeaway to leave us on right there, is that the thread of the gospel can run through all of these forms of entertainment. And that's good. I think that's something to be hopeful about. Yeah,
I think it's just good to sometimes just enjoy some nice entertainment. You don't have to think like they're trying to tell me to believe something. First of all, you don't have to believe it anyway, even if they are. Like, come on. But I think it's great. I think people just need to remember this is fiction, and it's meant to be fiction. Yeah.
Yep. This is fiction. It's meant to be fiction.
I think it's a lot more obvious when they're trying to get you to believe something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Trent, thanks so much for being here with me today.
Yeah, no problem.
I really appreciate it. Thank you to all of you who are listening. Make sure that you share the podcast. Make sure that you're following it. We 2 Wednesdays from now, we're going to be releasing our next episode. We're going to be starting a new series, and things are going to be they're going to look a little bit different, but in a really good way. So you're not going to want to miss it. Make sure you tune in 2 weeks from now. And last but not least, email any questions that you have to thecuriousHopepodcast@gmail.com.